Detroit Street's finest. I am Jack Grossman, and he is the new head coach of Holy Cross, Mark Lieberman. Coach, before we get anything else, I just had to say congrats on the new job. Super excited for you, and really, really, really ecstatic to see you get back into coaching.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's what I love to do. I get to stay in Louisville around my daughter, and coaching at the prep level has always been an absolute joy for me. That's where I cut my teeth to start. So it's just look, and to impact and to teach the game and to yell at kids again. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, there's surely nothing like yelling at kids, right?
There's nothing better.
Seriously though, they got a phenomenal coach and a better person. I couldn't be happier for you, coach, to be able to get back into coach. I know you've been wanting to do that on the prep level, as you said, in Louisville. Phenomenal. But
yeah, just staying around them is the most important thing. And look, let me just say this. Let me get this out of the way. Jack is the absolute best. He is the most patient guy in the world. I've been so busy with some things, and even today, the time wise, I had to reschedule it. And Jack, you are a real mensch.
The pleasure's all mine, coach. I'm just happy that we were able to make some time. It's been a minute. It has been a minute. Since we've done a podcast. A lot has changed since the last time we've done a podcast, but I figured, it's been about a month. Pat Kelsey, we can kind of let everything marinate there for a minute. We'll get to that. Obviously, that's what we're going to spend the bulk of the podcast on. But I had to ask you also, you had your first Kentucky Derby experience this past weekend.
Yes, I did. It was very Larry David-esque because there were so many people. It was very hot. I guess I'm kind of like an event snob, Jack, because look, it was fantastic. And I'm not diminishing. It's an unbelievable time here in the city, but I guess I'm kind of a spoiled, kind of a snob because in coaching, you kind of get dropped off right in front of the venue and you can walk right in with passes and there's always a bus waiting for you to leave and you're not sitting next to thousands of people. So yeah, I'm so glad I went. I enjoyed it, but that might be my last time going. So that's all. As the Larry David is strong in me. So
this is the difference between you've been coaching, you've been you've been used to that. See, I'm the peasant. I'm the one that was in the infield last Saturday. so where did you had the press pass, I assume. Did you guys get into anywhere fun?
Yeah, look, I just got to if nothing else, you just meet a bunch of people. Even like Thursday. So Thursday was crazy because I went out to Churchill on Thursday. And I was doing a show with Mark Ennis, and there was a shuttle bus taking you from the fairgrounds over to Churchill, which was a good idea because of parking and everything. And, having the press pass and then doing the show. But I met somebody on the bus. We started talking about Star Wars just to start. And then her name was Len Carruthers, and she was a huge expert. And she came on the show. She picked a couple winners that came to fruition on Oaks. Her husband's a big handicapper, so it was just fantastic. Got to meet her and got a taste of it. So not from look, horse racing is fantastic. I'm not from here. It was never just ingrained into me, but I love the whole atmosphere of Derby and the whole things that go with it. So it was a blast.
Yeah, there's surely nothing like it. I mean, I'll say this. I mean, it was
you
nice
look sharp, man. I saw you look sharp.
Oh, I was having fun. It was phenomenal. That was my 5th Derby. That's the first one I've been to where it did not rain. So you may say it was hot, it was sunny, anything like that. I was out there to Justify Derby where they set the record for rain. So I was
exactly.
It could have been literally anything, but as long as I wasn't wet, I was perfectly happy. It
was looming. It was looming. We thought it was going to be. And then the day before there was some rain, so you saw it, and then the sun just came out, and I was dressed to the T. Thanks to Luke Hancock because I didn't have time to see your father. So Luke had lent me some outfits, and I sweated through it quite a bit. It was like Albert Brooks in that movie Broadcast News, which you probably have never seen, but some of our listeners might have.
I have not.
Okay, well, when we're done with the podcast, just Google on YouTube Albert Brooks in the scene where he sweats in Broadcast News. It's a tremendous scene.
Did he look like Sean Miller or Buzz Williams over there on the sideline?
He looked a lot even worse because it was the first time. What a great movie, by the way. I think it won a bunch of Academy Awards. John Hurt, Holly Hunter. and he does his first. He's an unbelievable reporter, and it's the first time he's hosting the evening news. He's filling in, and as he's doing it, he's just drenched. He starts sweating like crazy, and it's a very funny scene. So, and a great movie. So, if nothing else, you'll get that out of this.
I'll have to let my dad know that you're wearing some of Luke's stuff, because he provides Luke's.
Oh, it was definitely no. It was channeled through your father. It was definitely, we talked about your dad quite a bit, and it was Luke. Luke had that from your dad. I just didn't. I realized, you know what, I got to up my game, and so now I'll see your dad moving forward, where I have a little time for him to fit me, and so
I love it. I will say, Dad set me up. That's the perks of being his son. Part of it, which is very nice. It feels good dressing up every now and again. I will say that's probably the last time I'm doing the infield. I love the infield. The race was phenomenal. Easily the best Derby I've been to. I'm 26 now. It's time. it's time to
Jack.
Figure something else out.
It's time.
Yeah. But that's next year's problem. For now, though, we should probably actually get into it. Louisville basketball, Pat Kelsey. I will start with this, because this is kind of more of a natural transition than anything else we can do here. Great Osibor, who it sounds like Louisville and the mutual partnership has kind of cooled in the last week or so, but he was in Louisville visiting Derby weekend. This is just kind of a good question theme-wise to kind of get us started here because we're going to talk a lot of transfer portal, a lot of additions, stuff like that. Something I always think about every year with both high school recruits and transfer portal guys is, you think of, Louisville, get them to visit around the best time it is to visit, which for Louisville is Thunder over Louisville and Derby week. For Kentucky, that would be probably the Keeneland Spring Meet. For Indiana, that's probably a Little 500 is what you want them to be. You want them to go when the place is at its highest and most fun. Does any of that actually matter when it comes to the recruits? As someone who's been on that side of it, does that thinking go into it at all with someone like that? Obviously, it doesn't, which I don't know anything definitive about Osibor. It just kind of seems like everything seems to be shifting towards more Washington, Texas Tech at this point. Maybe Louisville does pull something out and still lands him. But trying to get recruits on campus and in the city, Derby week, Thunder over Louisville, just kind of the premier times to be on campus. Does that stuff actually matter, or is that just me being on the outside overblowing stuff?
No, it definitely matters. What you do as well is you also get you talk to the kid, you talk to the family, because if he's like, well, it's not a big deal, or it's something, you have to kind of get a pulse on that, because it might be something where you don't get to spend a lot of time with him because there's so many things going on. And now you got to remember, this has changed a lot, because this time used to be before the transfer portal. This wasn't a time where you're having kids on campus and so on. The recruiting calendar has changed so much. Like, this is a tool for sure to show how great the city is with so many things. But like, if you have a kid that just wants to talk about facilities, or his what kind of coaching he's going to get, and where the arena you play in, and what's my role, then really that stuff is kind of like, it's not a huge factor. You almost put, and I always did this, and coaches will do this, you put together a kind of a pecking order of what's important to the player, and you got to make sure it's a fit. So if this kid any player has no interest in those events and just wants to know what's dorm life, and what's the dorm life like, and whether your strength coach, what does he do? How can I get stronger? How's this going to translate to the NBA? You've got to do your due diligence and know what the player is interested in as well. And that's a huge part of it. And as far as getting them here, look, Derby and Thunder, that's fantastic. The city's abuzz. It's great to do that. And you just try not to let that player leave, because nowadays it's almost like, it's like anything else. And it didn't matter even before NIL and the transfer portal. You're trying to get that commitment on the visit. And when they leave, there's just so many things that can go awry for as far as the recruitment goes. And especially with him visiting, his former college coach now at Washington, no matter what they have, there's a comfort level there. You want to get that wrapped up. And if you know this with Louisville, the guys they've signed were all guys, or the guys that committed to them, because they're not signing. And that's a huge thing for people to understand. They're not binded to that school. And when they commit, they've committed on their visits.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I think a lot of it's just how much faster the process goes now with the transfer portal too, in terms of you're trying to figure out a kid's personality that you maybe hadn't thought of 8-10 days ago, hadn't really, ever interacted with him. Now you're trying to judge, okay, would it be the best time to bring him in when all the events are happening, or do we want to just, keep it kind of quieter or that stuff?
Hey, Jack,
yep.
Can I interject something?
Absolutely.
Like for an older player, it might be different because we were dealing with high school players and getting their commitment. Now with the transfer portal, it's so different. Maybe a high school player is enamored with everything that's happening. And maybe the older player is just like, look, I just want to figure out how I'm going to be a pro, what's my NIL, and how you guys are going to make me better. And the other superfluous stuff is not going to be as much of a factor. Even though it's great for everybody else who lives here, it's not so much in the basketball world when you're dealing previously with high school players who are just going to be wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and just think this is the greatest thing ever.
I will say, if I was good enough to be a basketball recruit, I would absolutely use the official visits as ways to, let's have a little bit of fun.
Oh, that always happens. So no matter what, I've got some stories off the air to tell you, okay, about that. So
I'm going to hold you to that. I'm definitely going to hold you to that.
No problem.
But Osabor's cooled a little bit, and we'll get into like the big picture stuff, obviously, and talk about everyone that Louisville has brought into the fold. But since we're already right here, we'll go ahead and start with this. Has kind of been the topic du jour of the week. It feels like Louisville has James Scott in the fold. They have Ali Khalifa, who's coming over from BYU, who's redshirting, but it very much seems like they're trying to add another big. And Osabor was the big headliner when he was here last week, saying, okay. Kentucky's out on him now after they got, the three bigs last week. Washington's there with Danny Sprinkle and that angle. Texas Tech is there from the Big 12. But you're sitting there, you're Louisville. You're like, okay, if you want this guy, you're going to have every opportunity to go out and get him. Now, whatever happened, we're not sure. They still could technically get him. But it seems like now they're moving in different directions in terms of you're seeing other names for Louisville kind of being linked to. Coleman Hawkins definitely being the biggest one, and I think is by far the best fit for what Pat Kelsey wants to do as far as being kind of a stretch five, can handle the ball, pass the ball a little bit, rebound well, and is a really, really good defender as well. Very modern style big man. He's kind of the only guy, Achor, I hope I'm pronouncing his name. I always want to say anchor, but that's not what it is. Yeah. But he's a 44% three-point shooter last year. Other than that, though, it's a lot of guys that I'm like, okay, those would be good fits, but it's not the eye-popping name that like a Coleman Hawkins or a great Osabor would be. Do you think Louisville needs someone high-profile like that, or have they done enough work elsewhere to where it's more just we got to fill minutes here at this spot?
Yeah, if I'm obviously on the outside looking in, it's you've built a roster that's kind of experience laden and so on. So in the way that Coach Kelsey probably wants to play is their big needs to be a guy that can rebound, that can pass, and be a facilitator. So I would think that they would want a veteran type of player. And are they looking for a low post scorer that can just dominate inside and throw the ball in? I don't think so. I think they want to have a guy that's a facilitator on the perimeter, a guy that can get into dribble handoffs, can get into ball screens and maybe some pick and pops and so on. And that defensively can be an anchor for him as well. So you look at what they have, and with, the young man from BYU redshirting, and, how much depth do you have? And anything can happen. And no matter what, you just, especially with bigs, bigs with foot injuries and so many things can happen. And the reason those things are so prevalent is because they're always around bodies. And so when you're talking about bigs and foot injuries, it's because, look, they're in the scrum almost. They're around so many bodies, you can get stepped on, things can happen. That's usually a part of it where perimeter guys are operating in space. So to have depth there, it's important because things can happen. We saw that with Kentucky last year with Aaron Bradshaw. Those things happen. To have depth, to have a guy that's a veteran guy with what they have, they want to win. They want to win next year. And I would think that unless it was a outlier, really one of the top 50 players that you can have, then you find a guy that can just defend, pass, and understands his role. And if you have a guy that's younger, he's going to be maybe a ball stopper and a guy that's looking to score rather than understanding what do I need to do to help this team win.
The ideal fit just sounds like Ali Khalifa in so many ways, which
right?
Obviously it's a great thing for Louisville. They have him in the fold. It's very interesting to me that he's redshirting because, he was a dude that was a starter for Mark Pope at BYU last year and was a very productive player on a team that was in the top 15 in the country all of last year. You don't see a guy transfer a redshirt very often in a situation like that, but obviously they have his reasons, and you get an extra year on the back end for it if he ends up staying the whole time. So it very much works out. James Scott's a guy that has a lot of potential. He is not someone that's going to stretch the floor very much. I think like over 90% of his shots were right around the rim, which is never a bad thing to have a dude that can, catch lobs and things like that. That's just, even though he was with Pat Kelsey at college at Charleston, that's not the typical mold of what we were expecting from a Pat Kelsey big.
And the difference is you're going from the conference that Charleston was in to the ACC, where fouls are going to be more prevalent. He's going to have to guard bigger, faster, stronger players, where all of a sudden he could pick up that second foul early in a myriad of ways, whether it's an illegal screen or just coming over the back, where he could probably avoid that. And he was the guy getting more fouled, at Charleston. So, that's a factor. And with, and the young man from BYU, go ahead. Give me the
Ali
name.
Khalifa.
Listen, I'll tell you this, and I've got to get so much better at remembering names. I don't know what it is, but even my own team, I used to just call numbers. So that's as Coach Pitino did as well. But you would think there's an underlying reason for him. Maybe it was his initiative to say, okay, I want to be redshirted for whatever reason that is. But you would think he'd be a good fit. And you know what? Sometimes those things change. Maybe, and I'm just saying in any scenario. Maybe they just say, you know what, we need you this year. Here's more NIL, or here's this or that. Because you know what, if they strike out, then that's a viable option. But maybe there's things that obviously we don't know for the reason him redshirting this year. Because watching him last year, he was a really effective player.
Yeah, he was very, very good. He was basically a point center at times for BYU. It was very impressive.
Which is so in vogue now in college basketball. Obviously, with Robbie Avila, that's the mode that everybody's trying to emulate. But he kind of did that at BYU. So whether it was just changing his body, whether it's an injury, whether there's anything, or he thinks he needs more time to develop, who knows? But interesting that he decided to redshirt.
And that's the trickle-down effect we're seeing in college basketball right now, because who just got named MVP for the third time in 4 years? Nikola Jokic, a point center. That's fair. Who was the MVP that won the 1 year Jokic didn't win? Joel Embiid, big man, that they run all their offense through up in Philly. Sure. So we see it so much in college basketball to where we see what works in the NBA, and then coaching in any sport, but for our purposes, basketball, it's a copycat league, right? You see something that works, let's use it. Let's try to innovate it to fit what we do. And Pat Kelsey and Mark Pope as well at Kentucky are both very, very good at that new modern angle in basketball that what we're looking at. But I hear all that, and Coleman Hawkins isn't an Ali Khalifa level passer or a great Osibor level passer, but I think he checks off every single box. Other than that, he's a good passer for a big man. Don't get me wrong, but he's 37% from three last year. Very, very versatile defender. Has been in the biggest stage. Was in the Elite Eight this past year. To me, he's just out, especially with the rest of the roster the way it's shaped out. To have a guy that can shoot the three at the five would be really, really beneficial for Louisville, because I'm looking at it, and obviously like Corin Johnson, really good shooter. Rain Smith shoots the lights out, but James Scott isn't going to give you that. Javon Hadley was 42% from three last year, but on just 48 attempts, so not a very big sample size there. Terrance Edwards is a proven shooter, but there's not as much. And we'll get to Chucky Hepburn in a minute because I have a lot of thoughts on him. But there's not as much pure shooting on the Louisville roster that I was really expecting from Pat Kelsey. So if you were to give that bump with a guy that's a proven shooter at the center spot, I think that would be a bit more beneficial and not quite a necessity, but a lot more of one than I thought it would have been when Pat Kelsey got hired.
Yeah, just know that the coaches, it's not just happenstance. All right, we're just going to sign this kid, and this kid. They already have a plan, a scheme, a system that they want to implement, and they're going to find fits in whatever it is. And of course, Coach Kelsey is known for having shooters and surrounding those guys and playing fast and whatnot. But whatever it is, it's not like, all right, we're just going to take this guy and he might just be a good player, so we're going to fit him into this. No, you have a plan in place. They've had copious amounts of meetings about who they're recruiting, why they're recruiting, what's his fit for the style that we're going to play. So it's not just going to be, okay, we're just going to go after this guy because he's ranked 13th in the portal or whatnot. So we got him and we feel good, but now he's not fitting into how we're trying to play. So that's a huge part of it too, that the coaches are always constantly, you're having 4 or 5 meetings a day before they even open about, okay, let's rank these players. There's that dry erase board that has names everywhere. Everybody has input in how we're going to play. And Coach Kelsey has guys from his previous staff, so they know what he's looking for as a player for players as well.
And I'll say this, that's part of what makes the transfer portal so fascinating. The fact that, yes, you get like a Hunter Dickinson going from Michigan to Kansas, and everyone knows he's going to be a baller and All-American, and he ends up having a great year. But you also have guys like, Marcus Domask go from Southern Illinois to Illinois and be a really key piece in a team that had the best offense in the country last year. You have Lance Jones go from, ironically, again, Southern Illinois to Purdue and be the glue guy that really they were missing the past couple of years. That's the difference of them losing in the first weekend and going all the way to the title game, is having an athletic wing defender. You have Dalton Connect, who is more highly regarded than those two guys, but still coming from Northern Colorado. People thought he would be a good player. No one thought he was going to be the SEC player of the year. I mean, Antonio Reeves comes from Illinois State and was an All-American for Kentucky last year. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. I mean, Janai Broome coming from Morehead State to Auburn. People thought he'd be a good player, but no one thought he was going to be the key piece that he was for them. Mark Sears from Ohio to Alabama. Just again, the list just keeps going. So I'm looking at, you never know if a Connie Roots or Kashawn Pryor is going to be that next guy for Louisville if they were to get one of those two guys from South Florida they've been linked to, or maybe, Ugonna Onyenso from Kentucky has so much potential. I don't know if he's a great fit for what Louisville wants to do, but you give me his shot blocking, his rim finishing potential. He didn't shoot the ball very well around the rim. Ironically, last year it was somewhere around 40%, which is kind of crazy to think about, but the potential is definitely there. And just the defensive presence he would give. There's definitely other guys on that list that are very intriguing, but at the end of the day, you're trying to balance that. Okay, Coleman Hawkins has been a starter in the Big Ten for multiple years and was a stud last year. He's the type of guy, as an Indiana guy, I hated him the last few years mainly because, if he's on your team, you love him. If he's not on your team, you probably hate him. He's that type of player, Montrezl Harrell was that way for Louisville fans. Not that he's as good as Montrezl Harrell was. He's not, but he's a very good fit. I mean, obviously, North Carolina's going after him. A lot of schools are going after him. So that's definitely going to be a hotly tested recruitment. But that's what makes the transfer portal fun. You never know who the diamond in the rough is going to be about it, because guys can come from so many different places and just be absolute ballers in the portal. And that's part of what makes it a lot of fun to me. I mean, that you really don't know where it's going to come from.
And you look at it from the other side too. It's a lot of misevaluations in recruiting. And I've been on that end because I've been a high school coach. I've been a college coach, and I've known players. I'm like, man, the teams aren't pulling the trigger on this young man. And I'm like, man, this guy's good. I've coached him. I've seen him work. And you got to trust your eyes, but you also trust people in the recruiting world. And I've seen a bunch of players that I've coached that I've said, look, you're missing a gem here. You got to take this guy. And they don't. And then he ends up at another school and is a star for that school. And now all the misses that you've had are erased because now he's gone to this school and he's a star. And all of a sudden, he could play. And that happens so much, Jack. There's so many good players out there. And sometimes there's high major coaches that just rely on, the reports and somebody else's evaluation instead of trusting your eyes and saying, okay, well, this so-called recruiting guru doesn't think he can play and do this and so on. And so he's not in our top 50. And all of a sudden he goes somewhere else. So that's the beauty of it. And now you see these guys who've just been just absolute studs at the mid and low major level. And obviously they can play up. That's never an issue. Sometimes you'll miss on on bigs, but there's so many good players out there. That's why you see so many good mid-major programs.
For sure. I mean, the name I always think of is Dwayne Sutton. I mean, I remember locally watching him. You know, I went to Manual with him, and so I saw him play a lot of high school basketball back in the day. And I would watch him. I go, okay, he's at Manual. He was literally a 6'4", 6'5" center that was playing point center pretty much. He would jump. He would have jump ball. He would take the jump ball to start the game. Then he would be bringing the ball up the court and being the do all everything guy. And I was like, this dude does so many different things well. He's uber athletic. There's a place for him in major college basketball. He was under recruited, ends up going to UNC Asheville, balls out for a couple of years, and ends up being back on Louisville and playing a key role on some of Chris Mack's teams his first couple years.
It happens all the time. Look, when we played Michigan State in the NCAA tournament,
Brent Forbes.
Right. And so we're playing him. What was it? The Sweet 16 when we're playing him. And Richard Pitino and I got into a huge argument about Draymond Green. I'm like, that guy's got to be a first round pick. He does so many things. No, he won't be a first round pick. He'll be, he might not even get drafted or whatever. I'm like, that guy is so good. He does so many things. How are teams? And then you watch the draft. How many teams are like not seeing what this guy can do? And I'm like, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. This guy is so good. He can help you win. And he became bonkers, but like the guy was such a good player. It happens, right? Every draft that we see. And now we're talking about the professionals, and they're missing on players. I've always said recruiting and evaluations, it's a art. It's never a science. And you have to just, Rick Majerus talks about it in Life of a Napkin in his book. He would talk to the guidance counselor. He would talk to the players' friends. He would evaluate everything to find out what's the makeup of this young man. Like, how much does he want to play? How much does he love the game? Because you will find so many times, Jack, that you get players who just don't love it. They'd rather go out. We talked earlier about, all right, the recruiting process. I'd rather have a guy come in and say, okay, how do I get in the gym? Can I get in there at 2 a.m? What's our strength program like? Rather than all the other stuff and all the parties and all that kind of, no, I want those guys. And so you really, it's hard. Recruiting is difficult.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, you bring up with Draymond Green. It's always interesting to me. I understand why the NBA draft is how it is, that they draft so much based off of potential these days. But I look at guys like a Draymond Green, and it's like, the dude's a baller. Who cares if he's 22, 23? I mean, Dre Jackson Davis was like that this past year. Another Warriors.
That's a great example, Jack. That's an absolute tremendous example of that. The guy produced. He's played at the highest level. He can play. Oh, well, he doesn't fit this. He doesn't fit this measurement, and he doesn't check off this box. Come on, man. To me, that's like crazy.
Yep, I think Russ Smith was a great example of that, even though he never really got the chance that I thought he could have had with that.
That's the biggest mystery in the world. Yep. No, not at all. It's like, look, I love Russ. It's just the biggest mystery about how it just didn't happen for him. As far as the NBA goes, he's had a great career and he's done some amazing things. But if you told me that Gorgie would have played as many years as he did in the NBA and Russ wouldn't have, I would have been shocked.
Yeah,
and nothing to take away my G man because I love G. But
the crazy evolution of Gorgie Zhang's game is that he comes in day one. This way better than I do, and you had to teach him a lot about basketball. He just hadn't been in there, and then
a lot about life.
Yeah,
all right. He was sitting on Fred Hina's in the training room, and he was maybe $195 soaking wet, and was just a baby deer and trying to figure things out. So. He went through a lot, and I was so proud of him for sure.
I never would have thought with how raw he was when he started, even like his junior year when he was an absolute monster, he was hitting mid-range jump shots and all that stuff. I never thought he would be like a 45, 46, 47% three-point shooter in the NBA later in his career, which he was, which is, again, a testament to how hard he worked at all that stuff. But that just goes,
That's it. But you get guys who work hard.
Yeah,
I talk about Brook Lopez all the time. If a guy wants to get in the gym and what did he shoot 18 threes over his first 7 years in the league, right? Something like that. And Gorgie was a guy that was going to work on his game. He was a guy that loved to play, and a lot of credit to Coach Pitino as far as all the individual workouts and improvement for him. But yeah, you just don't know. But you have to know. You you got to figure out what's the makeup of a player. And Gorgie was the guy that's going to, when he becomes a pro, he understood what it meant to be a professional, and he was going to work on his game.
I'll pull it back in here to kind of the current team after this, but there is one more tangent that I thought of when you were saying that, and that's you watch. I did this a lot during the height of COVID and all that stuff, and I still occasionally do it. I watch like a lot of old games from like NBA era games, like the late 80s, early 90s, all that stuff. And the thing that always frustrated me more than anything is like you would watch like a Showtime Lakers game, and James Worthy would spot up for a jump shot. He would do it 2 feet in front of the 3-point line. And it's like, dude, you get an extra point if you take 2 steps back, right? But that's obviously they weren't comfortable that that's not was. You couldn't convince me that guys, like that back in that era who weren't great 3-point shooters, if the 3-point shot was emphasized the way it is today, that people, like a Worthy, like a Michael Jordan wasn't a great 3-point shooter, or like you could go on and on down the line of all those players and tell me that those guys wouldn't have been great 3-point shooters, how hard they worked on their games and stuff like that. It's just such a different dichotomy to me, to where I always hear, well, XYZ wasn't a great 3-point shooter who played in like the 80s and the 90s. Like, yeah, they weren't practicing that. You look at, how often, a guy like, again, I'll just use Michael Jordan, how much he developed his mid-range shot. You'd think if he wanted to develop a better 3-point shot and really dedicate himself, that he would have done it. I don't, the last thing I want to do is get into the damn GOAT debate, because I just don't really care. But that's just the one that I always hear about it with is, well, Michael Jordan couldn't shoot threes. So like the way he improved his game throughout with shooting mid-range jumpers and stuff like that, you're telling me he couldn't have extended that to the 3-point line if that was more emphasized back then? Of course he could have. And James Worthy's another one I always think of. Just a lot of guys back then. And I'm like, it's just a different game back then. But that's my tangent.
We'll leave that, and I'll just leave one comment on that is those guys grew up. Most of those guys grew up without a 3-point line in high school and middle school and so on. So it wasn't a factor for them. But if those guys were so skilled, that they would have become great shooters if they worked on it, or it was emphasized for sure.
How mad would you get if a dude spots up in a game you're coaching in that spots up for a jump shot 2 feet inside the 3-point line?
Well, it's the Coach Pitino effect as far as making sure that's his worst shot in basketball, on the line or right inside of it. He would just he'd lose his mind.
I remember I had growing up a Rick Pitino like coaching tutorial, and he was going through and having like Reese Gaines, and I think it was Eric Brown running through a bunch of drills, and Reese Gaines shoots a shot where his foot's on the 3-point line, and Rick Pitino just absolutely explodes on him, to where I thought, like, if you stepped on the line when you shot a jump shot, I thought you were like cursed as a kid to like never hit another shot in your life or something like that. But
the best month of the year is here, which is why you need to know that we are partnered with BetMGM. We'll be using BetMGM lines for making all of our picks and predictions, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's the best part. All you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your hard-earned money to get it. This is what you have to do to make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll get up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the rest of the NCAA tournament. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boost, and the thing that I love the most, a nice little parlay boost, as well as a ridiculous array of prop bets for anything that you could possibly imagine betting on. From odds on getting to the Final Four to national championship futures, I'm calling it right now. BetMGM is the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app. Use that code FIELD and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the pod in any podcast app. Like and share the YouTube videos that you enjoy. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show.
Anyways, we've gone down a rabbit hole, which I don't.
That's mind. Okay.
It's the offseason.
It's Louisville. It was Louisville basketball for the main part, even if it was down memory lane. I'm sure the listeners enjoyed it.
So I want to ask you about Chucky Hepburn.
Sure.
So I really, really love the Chucky Hepburn edition. That's been the one out of everything. I mean, Terrance Edwards, I think we'll talk about him as well. Well, Sunbelt Player of the Year. I think he's probably going to be the best player on the team, at least trying to just predict things into the future, how dangerous of a game that can be doing that here in the middle of May. But Chucky Hepburn, to me, when you're trying to lay a foundation, I don't know if there's anyone better to get a point guard that's been in major college basketball for 3 years that just makes winning plays. I mean, I put this on Twitter when he committed, but you think back to the game against Purdue in the Big Ten semifinals. It was him that hits the buzzer beater to force overtime. Yep. It was him that Wisconsin down 1 with about 35 seconds left. He picks up Braden Smith, one of the 10, 15 best point guards in the country, one of the hardest guys to kind of rattle. That was the big knock on Braden Smith his freshman year. He largely overcame that his sophomore year, to where he picks him up and he defends him on the ball for 10, 15, 16, 17 seconds, to the point where he frustrates Smith so much that he just elbows, throws him down, draws an offensive foul, fouls Smith out of the game, and gets Wisconsin the ball back, where they win the game on the next possession. Like, that's the type of dude I'm like, okay, come in, be the point guard, make winning plays, lay a foundation, help build a winning culture. That, to me, phenomenal addition for Louisville. The question I have for you, Coach, is we've talked about three-point shooting a little bit. With Chucky Hepburn, he's a very odd case. What the heck happened to him shooting the ball this last season? I'll give you some numbers here. During his sophomore year, 2022, 2023, he was 41% on 168 attempts. Last year, he was just 32% on 115 attempts. So less shots, worse percentage. 53 less attempts there for Chucky Hepburn. In a year where, before A.J. Storr, another unheralded transfer from St. John's, comes out, becomes an absolute baller and really a scoring machine. Now he's going to Kansas and got a really fat NIL check for it, I'm sure, because that kid is really, really fun to watch. Chucky Hepburn was supposed to be kind of the leader, the go-to scorer here. That's not really how it played out. It was more Storr, Tyler Wall, Stephen Crowell helped out some, but he was really kind of the pure point guard, which is a really great role to have. But percentage drops by 9 points, 53 less attempts. In Ken Pom Tier A games, which is basically like quad 1 games, he was in 2022-23, 32 of 71 from 3, 45% 2 years ago. So that's higher than what his percentage was throughout the year. When the competition got better, he shot the ball better. Last year, he was just 12 of 56, 21% in Tier A games. So same trend. Less shots, less percentage, less effective. How worrisome is that for you? And how do you try to get him back to that form he was in 2 years ago?
Not at all. And his effectiveness as far as shooting was a lot different than it was on the floor. And I think Coach Gard talked about it. We asked less of him from a scoring standpoint, and he gave us more from a winning standpoint. He's an influencer. And that means he's a guy that's going to come in and he's going to get guys to understand what it takes to win. And all the analytics and the numbers is you're coughing up a lung. So I hope you're okay.
I muted myself. I've been,
okay.
Yeah.
Hit the cough button.
You okay I know how to hit the cough. Yeah. we're hanging in there. We're hanging there better than I thought I would. So we're doing all right.
So with Chucky, I just think he's a absolute stud at that position. And the style of play, and you watch Wisconsin, and it's going to be more methodical. So it's not going to be as many opportunities in the way that they're playing because they asked him to do different things. Now, coming here, I'm sure that was something that was addressed immediately. We talked about the stuff that coaches will talk about. I'm sure they're saying to him, hey, you're going to get a little more freedom as far as shot selection, and it's going to transfer over to you becoming, a better look for professional basketball and so on. So what they're going to ask him to do, style of play, is a lot different. I'm not concerned at all with as far as that stuff goes. I think that's going to be a non-issue when he's here, Jack. Sorry, I was getting
you're all good.
Some calls coming in, but yeah, I think he's going to be just fine. I have no qualms that he's going to be an effective shooter, and he'll get in the gym because what they were asking him to do compared to what Coach Kelsey's probably going to ask him to do is completely different.
Yeah, Wisconsin did play faster last year, but that's faster compared to that's faster compared to one of the slowest teams in the country. So that's not anywhere near as fast as what Pat Kelsey's going to want to play at Louisville if it's anything close to what it was at College of Charleston, which is what we're expecting from that. Which again, even if the shooting isn't as good as it was 2 years ago, which that does help alleviate some of those questions I have about that. He's a guy that I think is going to do so many things well for this team that will be able to do, as you said, he'll do whatever you need him to do to help win games.
But he's also his shooting will go up too. I have no qualms about that because it's going to be a different way of advancing the ball. And sometimes the most dangerous player is a passer. So as he pitches ahead, which you didn't see Wisconsin do, and you're not going to see them do. And now the ball's going to come back as teams are flattening out defensively and closing out their shooters. He can step into threes and so on. So I have no doubt he'll be an effective shooter as well.
Yeah, which that to me helps a lot of things if he's able to be an effective shooter with, floor spacing, things like that, to where, you look at it again, you're starting him. How do you feel the lineup's going to work out? Because I've seen a couple different ways. And again, it's May 10th when we're recording this. So much can change. Always got to lay that out there. Do you see more Javon Hadley and positionless basketball again? I don't know how pertinent this conversation is these days, but it's still, again, May 10th, might as well have it. Do you see Javon Hadley, Terrance Edwards being more kind of your stereotypical 3 or 4 outside the wings and starting like maybe Chucky and Corin Johnson together? Or do we see maybe Traore fitting in the starting lineup, a guy that I think can play a really good role, really, really, really great defender, will do a lot of the dirty work for you. Reminds me a little bit of Dre Davis, kind of early on in his career at Louisville. As just a guy that makes winning plays, does a lot of the dirty work, but Dre's really developed his jump shot throughout his career at Seton Hall. Traore hasn't really had that happen throughout his career at Long Beach State, but just kind of, do we see Chucky, Hepburn, and Corin Johnson playing a lot together to where that allows Hadley and Edwards kind of bump up to the 3 and the 4 a little bit more? Or do we think that it's more going to be a true starter backup role?
No, I see it. And you said it as far as positionless. I don't think, numbers are going to matter if you're a 3 or 4, a 7, an 8. I don't think it's going to matter for this team. And they're going to have depth, and he's going to want to play a lot of guys because that's the style that he wants. So you're going to see a mismatch of just a mixed match of just guys on the floor together that you'll see. And you're right, though. As a coach, it's so hard to speculate. I think all those guys can fit into what he wants. They've got to figure that part out. But, this is when they start doing workouts and like, all right, let's make sure that we take this guy, he off the ball, or he's going to be great. Either way, we can put Chucky off the ball at times, and he can be a guy that can come off different actions, and whether it's handoffs or let's run pin downs for him, or let's get him into some early offensive stuff as well. So I think all those guys, and Edwards to me he's just a guy that does it all. He could step out. He's great. His mid-range and stuff. So analytics might be out the window with him as well, because he's just so good as far as in that little mid-range area as far as a scorer goes.
For those who haven't seen him as much, because he was at James Madison in the Sun Belt.
I watched a few of their games this year, and I really just – go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you just what your thoughts are on him and how you think he fits and where he's going to excel at.
He'd fit anywhere. And Louisville was really lucky to get him because that guy can absolutely fill it up. He does everything. He's a guy that's a stat stuffer, but he knows how to play. His IQ is tremendous. His length is going to be a problem for people because he can post guys up. He can play out of the post. He's got a high IQ. So he's a guy that can bring the ball up at times as well. When we talked about Chucky being off the ball too, where you have a situation where, all right, he can get the ball. What's great about some of these guys, Jack, you want to have guys that can rebound the basketball and blast out. And when you have guys that aren't always searching to be a passer on the rebound, that slows you down. So what Coach Kelsey is envisioning as well is a guy like Edwards can grab a rebound, 2 or 3 dribbles, he's already in a scoring position where other guys can fill and so on. It puts pressure on the defense as well. So when you have guys like that, which his roster does have, it's such an advantage because you're not waiting, okay, where's Chucky? I have to find him to run this stuff like a Wisconsin did. And now all of a sudden that extra pass, that 0.9 seconds allows a defender to get back in position. It takes away that early offensive edge that you have. So that's an advantage that Edwards does because he's going to be a fan favorite for sure.
Other than Edwards and Chucky Hepburn, who's one name that Kelsey's been able to land that has really gotten you excited and said, okay, that's a dude that's really going to be a really great piece here?
I mean, I really like those two. I like the fact that he got. I really do like those two that you mentioned.
I'm with you. That's one we've kind of been talking about him already.
I wish you would just said, "Hey, which guys really excite you?" And I would have just said Chucky and Edwards. But like, I like how he got a couple guys from Charleston as well, and Smith can really light it up. They're going to run a lot of actions for him. He's such a great. That just makes it just stretches you. It makes the defenders not be able to help it, and you can do so many things when you run actions and that guy is just sitting in the corner or he's up top and so on. And that just, but plus you have, with him and with Scott, you have guys that understand what's expected. So it really helps. Guys will come off the floor and what did coach mean by like this action? What am I supposed to do on this? Hey, this is after film. This is what coach is trying to get through. And this is what we're trying to do. And then on the floor, those guys are first in drill. So when you have guys like that in your program too. So they might not be flashy, but a Smith is a great kid to have because he knows he can be a tone setter as well because he knows what's expected. He's been through it.
Yeah, and like a guy like Chucky Hepburn can be, the quote unquote coach on the floor with, leadership and being around all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Ray Smith can be the coach on the floor of like, okay, I know how Pat Kelsey likes to do things. Here's how this is supposed to look when it's going right.
It makes practices go better because you have a guy that you're not explaining everything over and over. You're just watching him. He's going to go first, I'm sure, in a bunch of stuff early on because they're even just hand technique defensively and offensively where he's supposed to be. You just watch him. And it's something we would do with all our younger players, even in college and at Louisville. Hey, watch that guy because that's what you're supposed to be doing. And now you can watch Rain Smith and say, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do.
How do you think Javon Hadley fits in alongside Edwards at the wing?
I think he's got a similar type of body and whatnot. So I think you have some length. You have some guys that can. I think he's another guy that can score. I haven't watched enough of him to give you a fair assessment of all the things he can do. But I can tell you this: I probably watched about 12 James Madison games last year. And I just, that was a guy that I was just like, man, this guy just can just fill it. So I think they'll be fine. I think the thing about Edwards too, with that is that he's unselfish as well. Like that ball's not going to stick. He's going to make the same pass he could have, a second earlier. So that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I also like the fact, you look at Hadley, look at Edwards, look at Traore. Those are three guys that are built pretty similarly. Sure, that might not be your best offensive lineup if you have all three of those guys on the floor at the same time, but defensively, that gives you a lot of flexibility when you have dudes that are built, that 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", long, lanky, athletic, very versatile, to where that can give you a lot of advantages on that end of the floor too, which hasn't been talked about as much as the offensive end because everyone sees the tempo, they see the three-point shooting. The defensive end is something that's going to be very interesting to see. That's a little bit more of an unknown from what to expect on that end.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's a great point because then you have guys that are interchangeable, especially on that end. And every coach loves those guys that can guard multiple positions and guard 1 through 4 and sometimes 5 if they need to. So yeah, it's an advantage for sure.
Yeah, which I don't know if they probably wouldn't switch 1 through 5, especially, if it's Chucky or Corin Johnson at the 1 or James Scott.
You never know. We switched Peyton Siva onto bigs and he was a battler. He would front, he was 5'11", maybe 6 feet, 170 pounds. And he would front, what was the big kid from Pittsburgh? He would just battle that kid.
DeJuan Blair?
You know all the names, Jack. No, they had a center.
Adams?
At Pittsburgh. No, before that.
McGee?
It's okay. Yes. Yeah. He would battle him. He would just
I only know him because that's the guy that Kemba Walker hit the set.
Kemba Walker, right. Yeah. They do an absolute split and whatnot. I remember there was a game and I remember Peyton switching on him. It was out of necessity. So it wasn't out of convenience. It was a switch out of necessity, but he did a great job battling. So sometimes that happens, especially the way the game has gone where team and players aren't looking into the post as much as they use. Unless you're playing for Purdue or Houston or whatnot, you're not really threatening the post. So sometimes it's not a disadvantage.
What was that the game where the cheerleader threw the ball into the air after the Cal Curate dunk?
I think it was an away game, but you might be right. I'll have to
because that was the same year the Kemba Walker shot over McGee was the same year that game against Pittsburgh was in 2011, right. I believe.
It might be. We'll have to look that one
what
up.
Was how did Coach Pitino react to that? I mean, look, you guys did end up winning the game, so that saved us probably from the worst of what could have theoretically happened there. But what was that locker room and everything else like after, a cheerleader throws the ball up there for like 0.4 seconds or whatever, and that gives Pittsburgh new life? They had a shot to tie the game and send it into a second overtime after that.
Jack, there's been about 14,109 moments of Coach Pitino. So to recollect that exact moment, trust me, there's a lot of times it was just as similar in anything where it was just absolute mayhem and craziness and whatnot. But if you win, all's forgiven. That's something you can know. That locker room's a lot different. Coach Pitino's a lot different. Molly's and Molly Malone's is a lot different after games when we win.
You'd see Molly Malone's being a really fun time back in the day.
It was.
Yeah,
yes, it was.
Not old enough to enjoy that at that point. But before we get out of here, let's do this. With the roster as it's built now, thinking, whether it's a splash big like a Hawkins or an Osobor or just a guy that comes in to get more minutes. My expectation before Pat Kelsey was hired was like, look, we get it. It's a disastrous situation. We get it that you're coming in. You're going to have to build a whole new roster. But at the end of the day, you got to have the sense of urgency of the last 3 years for Louisville have been an utter disaster. You haven't made the tournament since 2019. You got to, if not in the big dance, you got to be at least on the bubble threatening for it and give, something for the fan base on the court to get excited about. And I think Pat Kelsey, has done a really, really good job of understanding that sense of urgency of look, especially now with the portal and with NIL, that you can turn things around a lot quicker than you used to be able to where, yes, it's still going to be tough. We'll see how it works meshing all these new pieces together. I think it's 9 people out of the portal to this point, and there's probably going to be at least 1, 2 more, if not more than that, to where I'm not going to sit here and say I expect him to be in the Sweet 16 or anything like that, but I think you can sit here and say, okay, he's put in a good enough roster here to where I think you can meet that expectation of bubble team and have the goal of being, let's get back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 6 years.
Yeah, there's a palpable buzz with everything, and he hit the ground running, and he's put the team together, and he's going to work the heck out of them with all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's not inconceivable to think that they can be on the cusp or a tournament team. And I have no doubts that he's going to absolutely work. His staff is going to work, and it's hard to say there's nowhere to go but up. I mean, It's obvious, but yeah, I think it's going to be a fun product as well. So you have that too. You're going to have a team that's going to play extremely hard. It's going to be fun to watch, and a team that can win some games and definitely make a run at trying to get back to the NCAA tournament for sure.
And is it going to be perfect? Probably not. But I think you're going at very worst, you're going to see a very competitive, as you said, very fun style of play, a very modern style of play. That's going to be a very nice cup of fresh air for what Louisville fans have had to sit through the last few years. But it's going to be a lot of fun to see what happens. It'll be nice. Hopefully next year we actually get to talk about basketball games, more than and we're not just going to be forcing ourselves to try to grind our teeth with it. Like
I'm going to bring my trusty putter out and be able to do clips from the game and say these are really effective things that worked.
Yes,
so it'll be a blast.
Because believe it or not, it's a lot more fun to talk about teams when they're doing good things, and you're able to show, hey, this is why this worked, instead of just always saying, hey, this is why they gave up 23 threes to Wake Forest.
Agreed.
But so hopefully we get back to that soon. And it looks like that Pat Kelsey's on his way to laying that foundation to get some excitement back for the program. I think that's pretty much. If you got anything else, Coach, let me know. If not, I think we've
just check out broadcast news with the scene from Albert Brooks or the Nat.
Absolutely.
This was absolutely a blast and always great doing a podcast with you, Jack.
Always enjoy it. Again, Floyd Treat's finest part of the Field 68 Podcast Network. Like, subscribe, all that stuff that I always forget to say on this. We won't be every week like we were during the season, but we'll be, we'll be popping up occasionally here throughout the offseason as news pops up to give us, our thoughts and everything on it. But Coach, always appreciate the time. We'll catch up soon. Again, congratulations on Holy Cross, man.
Thanks, Jack.
Super excited for you. Until next time, this has been Coach Lieberman, Jack Grossman, Floyd Treat's finest.